So the last 2 months, Brother Glenn gave an inspiring message on how the heavens declare, God's glory. So when he showed, pictures and videos of the sun, moon, stars, and all the galaxies, and so it got me to thinking that, in ancient cultures, they would, take, God's creation and worship it. And whether they felt like they were doing it wrong or the right thing, they worship, things. Um, so it got me to thinking, and even since I started this particular walk, I've been interested in paganism. Not that I want to serve a pagan god or anything, but it was just intriguing to me the things that people would worship, and the gods that they served, and how the weeks are named after pagan gods and the months of the year are named after pagan gods. And there's so many different civilizations that would worship pretty much the same exact thing, but they would call them different names. So I was always intrigued by that, right? And I had a conversation with someone at work, and we talked about idolatry, and we talked about idols, and they said, "Well, we don't do that today, so we don't go like idols don't exist in today." So it inspired me to want to talk about idolatry, right? So we tend to think of idolatry as a sin of the past or some Eastern mysticism. So like in the Western culture, we don't have any idols. So, or some people think that it's praying to a gold statue or praying to a wooden trinket. And since we don't do that today, again, we think we don't have idols, but idolatry is an ancient yet modern sin, and it's prevalent in our culture today. So these idols can cause us to have heartaches, frustrations. They destroy our relationships, but most importantly, they distance us from God. That's one of the main things. They put separation in between us and God. And God, of course, is the only one that is truly worthy of our praise and worship. And God is the only one that is able to fulfill our deepest needs and grant us the joy and the love that we all seek. So when life feels uncertain and the things that we desire and hope for seem unattainable, it's easy and comforting for us to grab hold of something that's temporary, a filler for the moment. So have you guys ever met someone that said, if I just had more money, if I had more friends, if I had more achievements, if I had a mansion with 20 rooms, 15 bathrooms, right? If I had 10 cars, that's all. If I had 10 cars, then maybe, just maybe, I'd be happy and content. So besides Vanessa and Daniel, anybody else ever felt that way before? I know when I was younger, my brother in the back as well. And when I was younger, I wanted all those things, and not really understanding what idolatry was when I was a teenager or my 20s. But these are things that I desired. These are things that I even went as far as lusted after. So when Yahweh, the living God that we serve, is not the main source in our lives, or if Yahweh doesn't sit on the altar of our heart, this type of mentality would lead us straight down the path to idolatry. So when we shift our focus off of Yeshua and place it on temporary, insufficient pleasures, that's when we cross over the dangerous waters with no life jacket, no flotation devices whatsoever. So whatever we treasure more than Yahweh, whatever drives our thoughts and actions, so what these things drive our thoughts and actions, and they're going to distance us again, push us further and further away from God. So we have to be careful the things that we adore, the things that we devote ourselves to, because we could be committing idolatry and not even realize it. And the scriptures say that Yahweh hates idolatry. So throughout this sermon series, we're going to look at the many faces of idolatry and also discuss how to discern, expose, and most importantly, how to destroy the idols in our lives. DED. And where I'm from, people spell dead that way. DED, dead. So that's my acronym, DED. So we are going to learn how to discern, expose, and destroy the idols in our lives. So, what is an idol? Glad you guys are all asking me that question. So, according to dictionary.com, an idol is defined as an image or representation of a god used as an object of worship, or a person or thing, that is greatly admired, loved, or revered. So, an idol is anything that replaces the one true living God. And idolatry is much more than worshiping a statue, again, or any physical image. So, idolatry is the misdirection of our worship. It is the misdirection of our worship. So, God is going before us, and we are supposed to be focused, to have tunnel vision on Him. And most times we're looking over here, worshiping something, we're looking over here, worshiping something, and we're not focused. We don't have tunnel vision. And best believe we're always worshiping something. Whether we believe that or not, we're always worshiping something. Sometimes we devote more and more time to something else than to God. And I think about this sometimes. When I wake up in the morning, do I get out of the bed, hit my knees, thank God for waking me up, or do I grab my phone and go see what's going on Facebook? So it's about prioritizing, what we believe in. So some people will focus more on simple things like getting a cup of coffee, or some people idolize their children and their grandchildren. It's so many things that we can idolize in modern day that takes our focus off of the Most High. So an idol, again, is anything that replaces the one true living God and is the misdirection of our worship. So it is a heart problem that we have, right? It's our hearts clinging to and confiding in things that don't, cannot, and will never bring us peace and security. I'm gonna say that one more time. It's our hearts clinging to and confiding in things that don't, cannot, and will never bring us peace and security. Now, idolatry is a major theme in the Bible. It is mentioned over 200 times, and in every book in the Bible, there's some mention of idolatry. So, idolatry challenges God's sovereignty and authority, and it offers an alternate explanation to the issues and joys of life. Now, there's a book that I've been skimming through online. It's called Counterfeit Gods. It's by an author named Tim Keller. So Tim Keller states in his book that an idol is anything more important to you than God, and anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God, and anything you seek to give you what only God can give you. When I was a teenager, I got my first job at 16 years old. So I worked at Wendy's, right? And I was there flipping patties. And my work 2 weeks, my first paycheck was $160. So can y'all guess what I did with it? Sneakers. Okay. I cashed my check, went straight to the mall, and they had a pair of Jordans that I wanted. And all my friends would buy Jordans, and Jordans, they did other things to get money to buy Jordans. But my dad was adamant about not buying me $100 pair of shoes. He told me he never had $100 pair of shoes. He said, and I'm not gonna tell you exactly word for word what he said, but he said, you ain't gonna have a pair of $100 shoes either. And I used to think, I'm like, Dad, you're supposed to want better for me than you had for yourself. This is my 16-year-old mind thinking. So I said, you know what? When I get my own money, I'm going to buy me a pair of Jordans. So I was so excited. I wore those shoes to school. I felt like I was walking on air. I couldn't even, like, I was just so excited, But in reality, like, I worship these shoes, right? And more, I worship Michael Jordan as well, because he was like my favorite basketball player. And I went to school, and everybody was like, "Oh, look, I got those new." We call them J's. They got the new J's on, and it fed my ego. And I'm like, "Yeah, chest poked out. I got the Jordans on. My legs. Sometimes my legs didn't even want to move. I was like, you tiptoeing around because you don't want to get them dirty." And when we think about, and I titled this is that I will not bow down, right? And it hit me this morning when I was just thinking about, all the ungodly things I've done in the past just to buy Jordans. And I thought about every morning when I put those shoes on before I went to school, I literally bowed down to these shoes to tie the laces. Oh. I was like, wow. Like God put that on my heart. He was like, you know what, you were worshiping those Jordans, you know. And not to say that when you buy a pair of Jordans that you worship. This is how I felt. This was like the most important thing to me at that time. But Tim Keller, very very good book, Counterfeit Gods. Now in the Old Testament, from the beginning, the threat of idolatry was always in the midst of Israel. So their forefathers were idolaters. Abraham was called to leave his home and leave out of worship. But some people were called to leave as well, but they took their idols with them. Now, there are several Hebrew words for idol, and we're going to discuss at least two of them. So the first one is called teraphim, and it is from H8655 in Strong's, and it comes from the Hebrew root word rapha, and that's Strong's H7495. And rapha means heal or healer. Now, the teraphim were often household gods that were figurines made of stone or clay, believed to have healing powers. So they were little small figurines, and they were prevalent amongst Israel as well. So they were said to have healing powers. They were always mentioned as plural, so it were many gods. So they were found in Mesopotamia early on, and it's said by biblical scholars that the teraphim represented the spirit of the ancestors that were thought to be present in the statues. So if your grandpa died, they would have a statue for grandpa. They would have a statue for Grandma Sally, Uncle Fred. So it was kind of like in modern day. And not to say if you have a family photo on the wall that you're worshiping them, but it was representations to look back on, because they didn't have cell phone cameras back then. So they would make these objects to represent the family. And I thought about this, in many cultures, they worship the ancestors. You see in some Hindu cultures, Asian cultures, some African cultures. We watched a movie years ago, popular movie called Black Panther, right? We love that movie, but they had certain parts in the movie where they visited the ancestors to consult, like kind of like a medium, So some of these people were highly into the occult, witchcraft, and so they will consult with the ancestors. So now also teraphim also indicated family authority, also the rights to the family inheritance, or the spirit of the teraphim meant protection for those that were traveling. So if you will, let's turn to Genesis 31. So we're going to go to Genesis 31. And we're going to start at verse 19. So in Genesis 31, verse 19, now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob stole away unknown to Laban the Syrian, and that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. Verse 21, so he fled with all that he had. He arose and crossed the river and headed towards the mountains of Gilead. Now in verse 22, Laban got wind that they left. And so Laban is going to pursue Jacob. So Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for a 7-day journey, and he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. In verse 24, but God had come to Laban, the Syrian, in the dream by night and said to him, be careful that you speak to Jacob, neither good or bad. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban and his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. Verse 26, and Laban said to Jacob, what have you done, that you have stolen away unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword? Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp, and you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good or bad. Verse 30. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? I bet Jacob was like conflicted. What are you talking about? So verse 31, then Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. And I think in hindsight, he was speaking something over his wife that he didn't even know he was doing. So in the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. Verse 33, and Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find them. Then he went out to Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols. She put them in her camel saddle, and she sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of the woman is with me. So she was on her cycle. And he searched, but did not find the idols. So, and after this message is over with, I want to hear from you. Why do you think Rachel took the idols? So there's many speculations on why she took the idols. And one thing that was interesting to me is that if you go up to verse 14, it says that Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Because God had appeared to Jacob and told him to flee and leave and go back to the land of his fathers. So we think about the different reasons that the word teraphim had meant. And it also meant whoever was in possession of the teraphim, that they had, rights to, they were like heirs. They had rights to inheritance and land. So I was thinking, I said, well, maybe she wanted it in her possession at some point so she can get, the inheritance. And there's other sources that say that she stole the teraphim because Laban would consult with them. He would consult with the ancestors and they would speak to him. So she took them away so that he couldn't consult with them and find out where they were going, because they were trying to flee away from him. Because Jacob had seemed to have been unfair to Jacob for the last 20 years. So, because I think these idols have really been important to Laban, because he chased them for 7 whole days to track them down to get these idols. So next, let's go to 1 Samuel 19. And we're gonna pick it up in verse 11. And I'm reading from the NIV. So verse 11 says that Saul sent men to David's house to watch it and to kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, if you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal led David down through a window, and he fled and escaped. Then Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment and putting some goat's hair at the head. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michal said, he is ill. Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told him, bring him up to me in his bed so that I may kill him. So we know from the story that Saul had a demonic spirit. He was possessed and he was jealous of David. And when I was thinking about this, I said that he wanted to kill David. Like he wanted to do the killing. So, but when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed, and at the head was some goat's hair. Saul said to Michal, why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped? And Michal told him, he said to me, let me get away Why should I kill you? So in parallel in both of these stories, both women deceive their fathers. But because she knew Saul's intention, so she's married, she become one. I know if Vanessa's dad was in pursuit of me, she would push me out the window as well. Right, honey? To save me. That's why I'm saying you want to save me. So, but and so also, when I'm deciphering these verses, I think, it says that David was at his own home. And it's hard for me to imagine David, a man after God's own heart, having an idol in his house. Or maybe he was unaware that there was an idol in his house. So, and also we see from the story of Laban and Rachel, some of the idols were small enough to put into a camel's saddle and take with them. And some idols were large enough to be human sized to where she can, disguise this as being David. Now, also teraphim, they were used for superstitious purposes. So in the culture of the idolater, they were givers of prosperity and guardians of life and property, also a fertility and good luck charm. Again, some were small, some were human sized. So it shows again that Michal, to me, she didn't have the type of relationship that David had, with the Most High God, for her to still, have teraphim and idols in the house. Now, also, if you read Psalm 59, David wrote a song about this very situation, how he escaped his enemy. So we're not going to read it, but it's just something you can read, a song that he wrote. Now, the next Hebrew word for idol is meskah. Meskah. And it comes from Strong's H4541. It comes also from the root word H5258, nesat, which means to pour. So these idols were all molten images poured into a mold or a shape. So it's kind of like melting gold or melting silver and pouring it into a mold or a shape of something to create an idol. So can someone read for me Exodus 20, verse 1 through 6? Okay.
And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor believe them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me. Showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments.
Thank you, Ms. Marilyn. So, in other words, reading this, that nothing in the created natural world was to be represented physically or worshiped as a god. So, did Israel keep the command? Did they follow suit? So Israel was not to worship them, nor to serve them, nor to create anything, in the heavens above and the earth beneath. And they already had, prior to the carvings and the tablets, they already knew what they were not supposed to do. So I read something the other day that says we become what we worship. We become what we worship. So when we think about, and I'm going, y'all know where I'm going next. I want to know what you guys think about when I mention the word calf or calf. What do you think about? Not just in the Bible story. What do you think about when you think about a cow?
T-bone steak.
I'm not mad at you for thinking that way. Yeah, T-bone steak. But the characteristics of a cow, what do you think about the characteristics of a cow? Mr. Timmons thinking dead on his side.
I'm thinking, and this is me, but I'm thinking of a heifer that I don't like.
That's fair. But some may allude to the idea that a cow is dumb, right? A cow is stubborn. When you think about a cow as compared to like a sheep, you know, sheep's got problems too, right? Um, or a cattle could be unpredictable. They're easily frightened also. So the Israelites made and bowed down to a calf, something that we would perceive as dumb, stubborn, unpredictable, easily frightened, right? Now, the Most High God is none of these things, right? So let's go to Psalms 115, verse 1 through 10. And can I get someone to read that for me? So we're going to go to Psalms 115, and we're going to start in verse 1.
Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory because of your love and faithfulness. Why do the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in heaven. He does whatever pleases him. But their idols are silver and gold made by the hands of men. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but they cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, noses but they cannot smell. They have hands but cannot feel, feet but they cannot walk, nor can they utter a sound with their throats. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. O house of Israel, trust in the Lord. He is their help and shield. O house of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is their help and shield.
Okay. Thank you, brother. So verse 8 says that those who make them will be like them, and so will those who trust in them. So again, we become what we worship. So, and I always think about that the Most High wanted to treat them like some cattle also and slaughter all of them. So they were stiff. I would think about them, being stiff-necked, right? Now let's go to Isaiah 42. Isaiah 42. We're going to start in verse 18 and read to 25. Can I get another reader, please? No, 42, 18. 18 through 25.
Verse 18 says, hear, ye deaf, and look, ye blind, that you may see. Who is blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger that I sent? Who is blind as he that is perfect, and blind as the Lord's servant? Seeing many things, but thou observest not. Opening the ears, but thou hearest not. The Lord is well pleased for his righteous sake. He will magnify the law and make it honorable. But this is a people robbed and spoiled. They are all of them snared in holes, and they are hid in prison houses. For they are for a prey and none delivered, for a spoil and none saith restore. Who among you would give ear to this? Who will hearken and hear for the time to come? Who gave Jacob for a spoil and Israel to the robbers? Did not the Lord he who against whom you have sinned? For they will walk not in his ways, neither were they obedient unto his law. Therefore he had poured upon him the fury of his anger and the strength of battle, and it had set him on fire round about. Yet he knew it not, and it burned him, yet he laid it not to his heart.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So Israel is described as being blind and deaf. And when we think about them being blind and deaf, we look at the gods that they served. They were clay, they were wood, they were stone, they were metal. And these objects can't see and they can't hear also. Again, they were becoming what they worshiped. So we have to be mindful as well of not swaying to worship something and again not realizing that we're worshiping that particular thing, devoting time to it, adoring it, so much so that we forget the God that's in front of us, the true and living God that's in front of us. So next I want to go to Exodus 32. And y'all bear with me, but I want to read the whole story in context. So we're going to go to Exodus 32. This is pretty fitting for this season that's coming upon us. And hate to say this, but I was watching the clips of the Ten Commandments the other day. And kind of goes along with this. So, verse 1. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong. So we're going to start at verse 1. So when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods. Who will go before us?" Now, I thought Aaron was stronger than he was. And he didn't even hesitate. He was like, "All right, give me earrings." No hesitation. He didn't hesitate at all. Ball a pot of water, and he didn't hesitate. So as for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. So they thought Moses may have died, or he got lost somewhere, or maybe, a mountain lion ate him or something. They just didn't know what happened to him. So Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf. So he melted the gold down and he poured it into a cast that was a shape of a calf. Then he fashioned it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." So when Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So the next day, the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellow offerings. And some translations say they rose up to play. I was like, man, that sounds like some of my cousins and my uncles, man. There was a barbecue about to go down. So afterward, they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people," it's not my people no more, that's your people, Moses, "whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.' I have seen these people," the Lord said to Moses, they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. "Lord," he said, "why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he brought them out to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off of the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce anger. Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people." Moses and God really had a relationship, because I probably would have been like, "All right, okay, if that's what you want to do, okay." And I'm thinking about, how the deep voice is when on movies, the guy got this deep voice like running waters or rushing waves. And I'd be like, all right. So, but remember your servants, verse 13. "Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And I will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever." Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. So Moses was able to help comfort him in a sense. So Moses turned and went back down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. The tablets were the work of God. The writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablet. So when Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, "There is the sound of war in the camp." They must have really been partying. So Moses replied, "Is it not the sound of victory? Is it not the sound of defeat? It is the sound of singing that I hear." So when Moses approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, his anger burned and he threw the tablets out of his hand. So he kind of felt like our God felt before he came down the mountain. So his anger burned, threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them into pieces at the foot of the mountain. So it's kind of like he broke the tablets because they broke the law. And he took the calf the people had made and burned it in the fire. Then he grounded it into garlic powder. I think that's what it says. He grounded it into powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. He said to Aaron, "What did these people do to you that you led them into such great sin?" Aaron answered, "Do not be angry, my Lord. You know how prone these people are to evil. You knew this before you brought them out of Egypt, these evil people." So, verse 23, they said to me, "Make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." So I told them, "Whoever has gold jewelry, take it off." Then they gave me the gold, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Man, that's a classic line right there. You know, when most people lie about something, it's because they're fearful, they're scared. And Aaron definitely was scared. Moses must have came at him like, "What have you done?" So Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them go out of control and so become a laughing stock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the Levites rallied to him. Then he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap a sword to his side, go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor." The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day." So we're going to go ahead and stop right here. So this is a very interesting story. And some commentary will say that, the people didn't mean to commit idolatry. They didn't mean to sin. They had good intentions. It's just that they just didn't know what God looked like. So we just made this, but we still had good intentions on serving the Most High God. I actually read that this week when I was looking up this story. So again, Moses was on the mountain receiving God's law. The people were getting anxious at the foot of the mountain because Moses had spent 40 days, 40 nights. And the people had started to think Moses died, possibly abandoned them. So the people urged Aaron to make them a god so they could follow. So they were accustomed to having visual representations because we got to remember they were fresh out of Egypt. And for their whole lives, they've seen gods that were represented by a statue or some image. So they were accustomed to having visual representations of God. So this was the natural result of their thinking. So the motivation behind the image of the calf. So I know you all been to Egypt and you kind of see, there's remnants of what they praised and worship. So I was looking at ancient, there's a guy called Apis. You guys may have heard of Apis. He was a god in the Memphis, Egypt area. And he predates the dynastic eras of Egypt also. So he represented strength and fertility. The cow, the bull, the calf represented strength and fertility. So according to study.com, Apis was a popular deity in Egypt, a fertility god. Apis eventually came to symbolize eternity, the cycle of life and death. And Apis was connected to another god named Ptah. Now, Ptah, that was believed by the Egyptians, was the creator of the world, the heavens and the earth. So Osiris is the god of death in the underworld. So every 25 years, a bull with specific white markings on his back was identified as the incarnation of the god Ptah. So they worship him in the temple of Ptah in Memphis, and the bull was then sacrificed, mummified, and put in a tomb in a lavish ritual feast that lasted 70 days. So the bull's death symbolized his union with the underworld god Osiris. So I'm thinking this may have been the motivation behind them making a calf. This is what they thought. It was like, you know, we sacrifice it and it represents Apis or Ptah. But when we look at this particular idolatry, an idolatry period, idolatry is parallel with adultery. So Moses burned the statue and grinded it into powder, and he made them drink it. So let's go to Numbers 5. So we're going to go to Numbers 5, and we're going to start in verse 20. Can I get someone to read that for me? So Numbers 5, verse 20.
Okay, I'll read it. Numbers 5, verse 20 through 22. But if you have gone astray, being under your husband's authority, and if you are defiled, and some man has lain with you besides your husband, then the priest shall cause the woman to swear with the oath of cursing, and the priest shall tell the woman, may Yahweh make you a curse and an oath among your people, when Yahweh allows your thigh to fall away and your body to swell. And this water that brings a curse will go into your bowels and make your body swell and your thigh fall away. The woman shall say, Amen, Amen.
Right. So they would take dust from the floor of the tabernacle, put it in a jar of water, and they would make the woman drink it. So, and the priest was if she was guilty, the priest would like summon a curse on her. And if she was guilty, her belly would swell, and if she was, you know, impregnated, she would have a miscarriage, and her thigh would rot. And then the women should say, Amen, so be it. So in correlation to the Exodus story with the golden calf, he made them drink this powdered water. Wasn't garlic powder, but he made them drink this in reference to this as if they were, you know, this adulterous woman. Because again, Israel was the bride, right? That was, and he made a covenant with them, and they broke the covenant. And I always think about, you know, a young man that's, you know, has a fiance and is getting prepared for marriage, and the preparation that goes into it, and finding the right suit to put on, finding the right venue, and all the things that you prepare and you work and sacrifice, and you have to save money to pay for these things. And then after you get married, the woman that you married runs off with the best man. And that's kind of what Israel, that's what they did. So it's a sad situation. Now, in Numbers 5, it was a test for a wife when her husband had the spirit of jealousy. Because two things, God says that he's a jealous God, especially when it comes to us, you know, being an adulterous nation, and he hates idolatry. Jealousy and hate. So Israel lived in an agricultural society. So before John Deere came along, they used to yoke two oxen together. So the oxen, they had to go the same direction, the same speed. So to help the oxen out, to help them go into the right direction, they used a wooden tool with a spike at the end of it called an ox goad. Right? Some of you may have heard of the ox goad before. So again, it was a long piece of wood, about 8 feet long, had a spike at the end of it. So if the oxen were going off track, they would hit him. And sometimes the oxen, you know, I guess it hurt, obviously. So they would kick back sometimes. And them kicking back, it would cause them to injure themselves in some cases. So when the ox refused to go, they were called stiff-necked. So a lot of times the ox, they just want to go do their own thing. So you got to hit them, get them back on, got to get them back in line. So when they were refused, they were rebellious, they were called stiff-necked. So Yahweh called the Israelites stiff-necked 3 times between verse chapters 32 and 34, and Moses called them stiff-necked at least 1 time. So they became what they worshipped, as we were talking about. They were unruly. They were impossible to control. That's kind of what stiff-necked means, impossible to control. They were blind and deaf. So when we are pricked with an ox goad, and that ox goad will be God's word, his laws, his statutes, his commandments. Are we going to be obedient, or are we going to kick back and go off the course? So we have to submit to Christ when we are pricked also. So it's easy for us to judge the Israelites, because when I first read this story, I was just floored. I couldn't believe that they would do such a thing after all that God had brought them through. But it's easy for us because we grew up in this, monotheistic, society, and to think about having multiple gods is just insane, right? But anciently, to have one God was insane to them, because they had multiple gods. So we have to remember that there were a mixed multitude also amongst them as well. Again, they were fresh out of Egypt, and I'm more than sure some of the mixed multitude still were idolaters and had this bad influence on the Israelites. And I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. So, but Yahweh blamed all of them. Y'all all in the same boat, regardless if you a mixed multitude, if you in the house or you're out the house, y'all all together. So when we read this story, and it says that Yah's anger burned hot against them. He wanted to take out all of them and just start fresh with Moses. And when I sit and think about it, in his defense, people say, oh, that's harsh. You hear the stories when people say the God of the Old Testament was just harsh and he just wanted to kill, kill, kill. But, I think about it in his defense, like we talked about the story of a man preparing himself for his bride, and she runs off with another man. He brought them through so much with all the signs and wonders that he performed within Egypt, them crossing, the Red Sea, giving them shade during the day, fire by night. He fed them, he clothed them, their clothes didn't even get dirty in the wilderness. Like he really valued these people and loved them, and made a covenant with them. And then they break the covenant. So he had done so much to gain their trust. So subbing the calf in at that point in the game is just a slap in the face. It's very insulting, to God. And we think he should be jealous, because if my wife runs off with another man, I'm going to be highly upset. I might be so mad I might burn the whole house down. I'm sorry, not really, Mr. Sunday. Mr. Sunday, like, hold on, man. Mr. Sunday, like, hold up, man. I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk to this Vanessa girl. Yeah. So, but the lesson in the golden calf, again, is that God hates idols, as we know. He wants to be our only God, and it angers him when we put other gods before him. So idols don't benefit us because they have no power. And again, idolatry is synonymous to adultery. So next, let's go to Exodus 34, verse 10. And can I get another reader, please? So we're going to go to Exodus 34, and we're going to read verse 10 through 17. Okay.
Exodus 34, 10 through 17. And he said, behold, I make a covenant before all thy people. I will do marvels such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among which thou art shall see the works of Yahweh, for it is a terrible thing that I will do with thee. 11. Observe you that which I command you this day. Behold, I drive out before you the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you go, lest it be for a snare in the midst of you. But you shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. For you shall worship no other God. For Yahweh, whose name is a jealous Elohim. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a whoring after their gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods, and one call you, and you eat of his sacrifice. 16, and you take their daughters unto your sons, and their daughters go whoring after their gods, and make your sons go whoring after their gods. Verse 17, thou shalt make no molten god.
So, God is such a merciful, gracious God, and he forgave them for their transgressions. And he's renewing his covenant with Israel. He tells them to break down the altars of these idols, smash their stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. So he reiterates not to make any molten gods again. So we know the history of Israel is that they were into idolatry, they were forgiven, we have healing and restoration, and then back to idolatry, right? And it was a continuous cycle. They prayed for forgiveness, got forgiven, go back to idolatry. Vicious cycle. So let's go to Leviticus 19, and we're going to start in verse 1. Can I get another reader, please? So Leviticus 19, 1 through 4.
The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and saying to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord, your God, am holy. You shall fear every man his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Turn you not unto idols, nor make unto yourselves molten gods. I am the Lord your God.
Thank you. So once again, he was reiterating to them, do not make metal gods. Don't make any stone gods or clay gods. So he had to keep reminding them because they were, again, stiff-necked. They kept drifting off, going in the opposite directions instead of on the prescribed path. Now, lastly, we're going to go to Deuteronomy 27, verse 15. Deuteronomy 27, verse 15. And can I get one last reader?
I'll read. Trust is anyone who makes an idol, a thing acceptable to the Lord, the work of skilled hands, and set it up to keep.
And then all the people shall say amen. Amen. So none of us want to be cursed. None of us want to be cursed. We want to have blessings and favor from the Most High, especially for us as believers. But many people will allow idols to be set up behind closed doors. Again, some people not even realizing they have idols. So we have to ask God in our prayer time to reveal idols that we have in our lives and help us to remove those idols of our lives. Because some idols have strongholds over people. So they are set up in the hearts and in the minds as well. So God has to be the priority over everything and everyone in our lives and not some false idol. So in conclusion, we can't exchange Yahweh's glory for idols and images. Idols misrepresent the nature of God and it destroys the nature of man. They turn us into mindless, powerless, and unspiritual pieces of flesh. We become like those statues. The nothingness of idols will turn us into nothingness. So let's keep our focus on Yeshua and let's flee idolatry.